The most learning comes from experienced people who have radically different experiences than yourself and can really give a different spin to concepts that you think are familiar, but they're taking in a whole different direction. Literally, I cannot think of any startup that I've known that ship daily and talk with customers all the time that has failed. If you go back exactly to the original interview of Bertrand at the Lenny's podcast and others, he said that you should pay attention to what are the areas where your judgment matters and you cannot give them up.
Hey everyone, I am super excited for today's episode. Today we have Luca Rossi, who is the founder of Refactoring, a newsletter and podcast with over 120,000 subscribers about writing good software and working well with humans. Luca has written over 250 articles that are read every week by VPs, managers, and engineers at big tech and high growth startups. Before Refactoring, Luca has been the head of engineering at Translated.com and co-founder and CTO of Wanderio, where he grew the product from 0 to 25 million customers. So let's get into it. Luca, thanks so much for joining. I feel like we're hot swapping podcasts because I was on yours and now you're on mine. So thanks for joining.
Yeah, thank you for having me and thank you for joining this show before. And I'm so excited to do this.
Amazing. Well, you have a fascinating journey in technology and now as a creator and writer and podcast host, but you started in many different roles. You co-founded a travel company called Wanderio in 2013 and served as its both co-founder and CTO. This probably provided you with a lot of insights that are great foundations for what you do today as a writer. But what were some of the biggest challenges that you encountered during your time as CTO, and what kind of lessons did you learn about building and scaling a successful company to what I think 25 million users?
Yes. I mean, so many challenges and so many lessons learned. I think it was like a lifetime of both condensed in about 10 years. We started the startup as our very first job out of university, and it went beyond our wildest expectation. It was very successful in Italy, and we eventually sold it to another bigger company in the travel space. So I think when I have to think about challenges and lessons learned, the first thing that comes to my mind is that most of them were not about technology, which instead was the thing that scared me the most at the beginning, because you work in travel, you have to integrate all those APIs. It's very complicated. I had never done anything in my life basically with technology. I had just graduated in computer science, so I was very scared about that. But eventually most problems and also most good things that we did were very human, were very about how to work well with people, how to make other engineers and people in the company aligned, happy, productive, hiring the right people. And even the biggest mistakes that we made were about this. And I think that's one of the reasons why I started writing the newsletter, which is more about how to work together in a software company rather than your latest, tutorial about Next.js. Because I remember being a young CTO, I couldn't find a lot of content and a lot of good advice about running engineering companies, while instead you could find, of course, everything about how to create actual software. But I mean, you have to stop me because I could talk for like 2 hours just about my startup.
I love it. And I've heard this before, and I think it's so true. There is no such thing as technology problems, only people problems. And I think that's the case in tech. I mean, I've experienced it myself. It always boils down to how well people work together, how ideas are crossing the bridge. I mean, I think that's why we have developed so many crossover practices like DevOps, SecOps, DevSecOps, like all of these practices merging together. So you describe yourself as an entrepreneur who loves leading engineering teams working on great products. So can you elaborate, what does great mean to you, and what are some of the key principles that you follow when you are leading teams to develop them?
Yeah, so I think at a high level, a great product simply means a product that customers love and they can't live without. Even if it doesn't matter if you're solving a big problem in their lives or a small problem, but it's something that they would really be disappointed if you take it away from them. So, well, and to get there, I think it boils down to very few things, but you have to get them right. I think for startups, especially early stage startups, it's mostly about moving very fast and setting your team and yourself up for being able to move very fast and talking with customers all the time. Because I think moving fast it's like buying yourself more time. You know, the smaller your cycle time and the time it takes to do anything, the more things you can try, and the more, you know, your time, your runway expands virtually. But of course, you need to make sure you do the right things. And the only way I know that is reliable to do this is you keep talking with customers all the time. I think literally I cannot think of any startup that I've known that shipped daily and talk with customers all the time that has failed. You can't fail if you do that. And I also think there is sometimes this false antagonism in tech between speed and quality, which I don't think it really exists in many cases, because it's kind of speed taking care of quality as well. I mean, if you move fast, then maybe you do some more mistakes, but you're also faster at recovering from mistakes. So I think it's very important to just go faster. It remembers me about, there's a story that is famous, I don't know if it's a fantasy or a real story, about like a study on pottery. There's this pottery class, and there are these two groups, and one is tasked with creating just the best vases they can, and the other one is tasked with creating as many vases as they can, as fast as possible. And then they leave them alone, these groups of people, for a while, and then the professor comes back, and it turns out the group that had to create the most vases created even better vases, because they, to optimize for going faster, you have to harden the process, to leave out manual error and optimize for all kinds of things that eventually lead to quality as well. So I give a very long answer, but the short version is moving fast and talking with customers for me.
Yeah, and I firmly believe that as well, being having gone through that myself. But I think you make a really great point about talking to customers, because I actually had a founder on the first episode of this podcast talk about the same and some of the mistakes that he made. But he basically emphasized the same thing. He was like, I would have gone back and focused even more on customer discovery and building a product based on customer feedback and interaction. Whereas a lot of, I think, founders go into it solving a problem that they specifically feel is needed, and building a V1 of that and hyper focusing, and then later realizing that it isn't necessarily the market that the market that they're trying to advance in or what they need. So I think customer discovery is at the heart of building great products. Absolutely. I wonder if you also feel the same with what you're doing now. Like, how do you incorporate that into writing?
Yeah, so I think one thing that really helped me when I started writing is that I literally started writing the things that I would have loved to read when I was younger, when I started doing my work as CTO, which was, again, my very first job. And so thinking about the things that I struggled the most and I couldn't find great advice about, I started writing them. And so I had this ideal customer in my mind that was basically myself. And that was very important, to center the space and the topics around things that made sense. But I think that it's not enough because it's so frequent that startups don't talk enough with customers. And I think one of the problems is that founders start by solving a problem that they have themselves. And this is good. This is, I would advise doing that instead of the opposite. But you should not fixate on yourself all the time, only on yourself, because there are many customers that are potential customers that are not yourself, that you could easily serve with your product, with writing in my case, etc. So I think in my case, I'm a little bit facilitated by the fact that writing gives you a very good feedback loop of people writing you back, replying to the emails, giving you good or bad feedback, asking for more questions, so you can more easily keep the pulse of what people want to read and what they don't like to read instead.
Yeah. And I think this applies to a lot of things in life, but I love the quote of what got you to where you are today isn't going to get you to where you want to be in tomorrow.
Yes.
And I think that applies in so many facets of life, including building great products, being a good creator, and not falling into the cycle of plateauing. As a builder, you have to continuously adapt to the new environment, especially as consumer behaviors and even B2B customers change with other competitors now in the market.
Yeah, 100%. I agree. And I think this is especially true for creative work, content creation work that relies and thrives on your creativity. I mean, the moment that this becomes like a routine, a simple workflow for you that requires less of your best energy, then the quality of your content inevitably suffers, I think. So I think you should continuously challenge yourself to do things maybe a little bit different, to do things a little bit out of your comfort zone, even if it departs a bit from how you have been creating stories and content, so far. But that's the only way, to keep things fresh, because people can smell this from a mile away. It's immediately evident.
Yeah, and you've been able to do that with your latest podcast. You introduced this refactoring podcast now into the mix, which, as you mentioned to me off camera, that was new for you and getting into the swing of interviewing people. But now at this point, you've interviewed numerous leaders and experts. So what are some of the most valuable insights from these conversations, and how have they shaped your own perspective on engineering leadership?
Yeah, there are so many. I think that, first of all, the goal that I had when I started the podcast was really to go out of my own echo chamber, because I had been writing articles on the newsletter for a long time. It was basically my own research, my own thoughts and ideas. But of course, there is a whole real world out there of people who do not agree with me on many things, and it's I wanted to be challenged and to learn stories from others that didn't think about things like myself. And I can mention many things. I mean, I've been fortunate, for example, to interview Dennis Yaratz, who is CTO of Perplexity, just a few months ago. And he described me how he runs the company. It's in like a new generation company away from what I've been used to as a founder. And he described themselves as an LLM first company, that every task they do, they first try to do that with LLMs, and the humans are like fallbacks for when they can't make the task with LLMs. And it's such an interesting perspective. So I think in general, the most learning comes from experienced people who have radically different experiences than yourself and can really give a different spin to concepts that you think are familiar, but they take in a whole different direction. So in a way, you should seek for guests and people to talk with that share things with you, that of course have some similarities, but also that have some radically different, experience in some department. I don't know.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's something that we've departed from in some cases, with people really finding their tribe, but also becoming an echo chamber with their own communities.
Yes.
And I love revisiting just the fact that we can have progressive and productive conversations and discussions where you can constructively disagree and be okay with that, or at least like introduce new concepts into your perspective and say, okay, well, that's not what I've experienced, but it's valuable because they have their own lived experience and they're building this incredible company that's clearly making waves in the AI community. So what can I learn from that?
Yes, and it's very hard to find the right balance in a way that creates the perfect mix between talking about things that where both you and the guest have common ground, they share views about the world, and there is a common space around which to talk about, but at the same time there is this kind of conflict, or there is this kind of contrast between different experiences that is what ultimately leads to learning, because otherwise if I interview myself, I don't learn anything. But even if I interview like a professional golfer, I don't learn anything because I don't play golf. So it's kind of an art, and I like to think I'm getting a little bit better day by day, and that's the goal.
Yeah. Well, I have to ask because this has been the topic of conversation in tech now for the last several weeks. But being a startup former founder, how do you view the concept of this founder mode that Brian Chesky has been talking about? Do you feel like being a forcing function in the company is scalable and works, or do you feel like having other leaders that you can rely on with domain expertise is the way of scaling your practices and building the right structure in place? And this has to do with having these conversations with other leaders and being able to disagree or rely and lean on other people's perspective based on their own experiences.
So I think that there are so many angles to talk about this thing. I mean, first of all, I think the whole controversy around even the Paul Graham piece comes from the fact that Paul Graham was very high level about this whole concept. He basically just said, there is this thing that exists somewhere, in my opinion, that is called founder mode, but we don't even know what it is for real. So, and people use that label, and attached it to whatever they felt. They felt the need to, and hijacked this concept. But if you go back exactly to the original interview of Brian Chesky at the Lenny's podcast and others, I think what he said basically is that he went through a time where he went too much hands off and delegated things that he should have not delegated. And I think he never said you should not rely on great managers and great people that you have hired and their judgment. He said that you should pay attention to what are the areas where your judgment matters and you cannot give them up. So I think the answer on this changes by each individual person and founder. And I think all founders should find their own, let's say, area of genius, their own area of special expertise that bring the special sauce from probably he brought that from the very beginning, from the foundation of the company, and it's something special about them and their expertise that they cannot delegate and that they should stay in touch with. And it's not just a matter of efficiency and effectiveness of the company, it's also for your own well-being, for your own motivation, because the things that you're the best at doing are probably also the thing that you like doing the most. So if you listen to Brian Chesky, he was not only less effective as a leader, he was also sad because he was not doing the things that he loved anymore. So the holy grail to me is figuring out what you should trust your people on to take off of you, off your shoulders, because it's needed to scale the company, because you're not the best person at doing that, etc., versus the things that you should keep doing because you're creating real value in that.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what I've learned about in leadership is about enabling others, right? I think one of my favorite quotes is that success is in the agency of others. How can you empower other people to do their best work and lean on them for their expertise? And you get to save your time for what you are uniquely capable of. And I think that's the key for founders, for leaders, any situation. So I love the clarity that you've brought to that conversation because, as you mentioned, the term founder mode has expanded to oblivion and now it is almost meaningless, kind of like how people say like Karen now just means anyone who's like angry, and then woke means a lot of different things to different people now, right? So whatever drives the conversation on Twitter or X is gonna, there will be another term in the next 6 months, right?
Yeah, it's very hard to bring nuance, of course, in the online discourse, and there are topics that are extremely nuanced. I mean, one of the curses of management and leadership is that the best answer to most questions is like it depends, because it depends on the scale of your company, the stage of your product, your personality as a leader, as a founder. So it's very hard to find universal advice that applies to everybody. But at the same time, it's very hard, to give good nuanced advice on these things online, because the medium does not allow for a lot of good conversation.
180 characters. It's like,
yes, exactly.
We'll see. Yeah. Well, this kind of has to do also with just the human side of working in tech and building great software. So you've spoken to many people and have written about various topics in your newsletter, but what have you learned about the human side of software development, and what advice would you offer to building stronger teams?
Yeah, so this really ties in with what we said before, that all software problems are actually human problems. And of course, there are so many like pitfalls and misconceptions, in my opinion, about many things. But I think the most recurring problem is that we as humans, when we have different roles, there are engineers and managers and everything in between, and product and PMs, etc. And many times we tend to approach issues from an angle of antagonism or slash fight, rather than collaboration or curiosity about other people's goals. I think in part this is how we're wired as humans anyway, to protect what you do, and we're probably wired to fight in some cases against people for things. But we should always remember that the final goal is collaboration and creating things together. So the most productive way of doing things is like putting yourself in the shoes of other people and figuring out what are the other people's goals and what drives other people and how to find middle ground. And it saddens me that there is a lot of tactical advice, on resolving conflicts that is, taken from other domains that I don't think are really relevant, like, I don't know, FBI negotiation or other things where, the other party is literally your enemy, is a terrorist, while instead you're, I don't know, in the workplace, you're not dealing with terrorists. It's people you
no hostages here.
Probably not in most workplaces I've worked with. So the final goal is to do things together. And if we're able to bring more empathy and more collaboration, I think great things happen. But it's hard, to be honest.
It is. And that's something that I've seen a lot of people, like in my time in DevRel, start to talk about, is like empathetic leadership and customer empathy. And I see a lot of more content in the area from like emotional intelligence in leadership. So I feel like it's becoming more part of the central conversation. And I think it's important to acknowledge, because I think in tech, a lot of people see communication, collaboration, and this like human side as like secondary to the technical problems and the innovation we're trying to solve, when in reality, these quote unquote soft skills are really core to enabling the technical advancements that we're trying to do.
Totally. And I think soft skills are going to be possibly even more relevant and important in the future. I mean, when you look at the progress in tooling and AI and things that make our work better, they are more likely to impact our hard skills, and make our technical work easier. And so I think that people who are great communicators, great at soft skills and at collaborating with people are getting more and more leverage, because that what will make them stand out and perform better, as opposed to someone who has been focused 100% on coding in their own IDEs or all the time.
Yeah, and it honestly makes me feel more valued, I would say, in the organizations I've been a part of, because I've always struggled with feeling secondary or less credible coming into an engineering organization with a different background, right? And I have my own niche, right? But it took me a long time to get the respect of the engineers around me sometimes. And so to see that my storytelling skills and communication have actually begun to set me apart and be celebrated, it just emphasizes that this is equally as important and can actually help your brand more in a lot of ways.
Completely. And we started seeing some more advice online about, soft skills, communication, managing up, domain that was previously thought of only belonging to engineering managers and people with managerial duties, while instead people are realizing that even if you're an IC, even if you're regular software engineers, you need to exhibit the same qualities in many cases to drive more impact, to be able to take on more on your plate. I think that what many people do not understand is that, probably just a few years after you start working in the tech space, what gets you actually promoted is not your pure tech chops, but it's what the impact that you have on the company, on the business, and that is just in a minimal part driven by how great the code you're able to write is, and more about how you're working in a team together and play and do the right play in a professional sport team.
Exactly. There was this thread that I read recently that tech promotions are 10% luck, 20% about your technical ability, and 70% about observing what is rewarded and doing that, right? Usually leadership and delivery on impact on the business. And I think a lot of folks that feel stuck in their careers are not moving forward. It's like revisit how you're running your own business. I feel like people need to see their work as almost like the business that you're conducting, and how is that driving, towards like what other people care about.
Yes, absolutely. Otherwise, you feel, as an engineer, you stay stuck in your own echo chamber in which you create technology for the sake of it. That's a risk that we engineers, have, because we likely get into this space because we love technology, we love creating technology, but it's important to realize that we do not create technology for the sake of it, at least on a professional level. Then on our spare time, we can do whatever we like, but it serves the business. It's always in a way that it serves the business. And that's also a lesson that I had to learn as a CTO. I loved writing code. I loved, creating great technology. But when you have, your own runway shrinking, money that gets lower and lower in the bank, in the startup, that's a very real reminder that you don't do it for the sake of it.
Yeah, as fun as the work that you do is, it's like, this is the reality of the situation, is we have to be running towards this business sustainability effort, right? It's like, how can we keep the work that we do alive so we can keep working on the things that we enjoy? That being said, we've had quite a big change in software with AI, and now everyone's rushing and feeling like, well, now I have to change what I'm doing. Some organizations are basically mandating an upskilling in the AI world as a forcing function to their engineering team. So I'm curious how you feel about it, and maybe some of your predictions. I know you've written about in the past about how it's going to impact software.
Yeah, so I feel very optimistic about it. I've spent the last couple of months trying as many things as possible by myself. And of course, I know this is not enough, because as a full-time writer, quote unquote, I have only toy projects to try things on. So I spoke also with as many people who do real job in big companies as possible in the refactoring community, and tried to collect my own thoughts and also other people predictions and thoughts about AI. And the TLDR is that I'm an optimist that AI will really make our jobs as engineers better, because it has the ability of taking many of our chores, because we have so many as engineers, and take them away from us, and also improve the quality of the things we produce. So I think it would be a boon for many things, like improving quality through figuring out vulnerabilities, improving security, improving testing. There is a lot of automation that can be built through AI to make the code better. And I think the biggest challenge will be around creating the right workflow that empowers the human side of the job. So we will be left probably with the most creative, rewarding parts, like system design, high-level thinking about systems. But we will have to figure out how to work with AI in a way that it rewards both what AI can do best and what humans can do best. I have also some concerns around a few things. I'm afraid that there will be like a time of hardship for junior developers, for example, because as with all technologies that increase leverage, they tend to make this power law steeper, in which the biggest adopters get even more leverage and get even more value in the market. And these are, of course, probably the most seasoned engineers who can leverage their own existing, as we said, system design, high-level thinking skills, while fresh engineers who come on the job with mostly their coding skills, mostly equipped with that, they may find that companies may find that AI can do a lot, and so that there will be more hardship, I think, because it's obvious to me that it's very important to create a good cycle and mix seniority on the team, and junior developers bring so much on the table because they create growth mindset and mentor behavior from senior folks. I think they're so important, but I don't think this is evident to all companies. So I think we need to do a great job to make sure that the job market stays healthy for everybody. And my last concern, which I'm not 100% sure about, but there is a future where this happens, I think, is that the actual innovation in tech, when it comes to languages and frameworks, kind of slows down, because so far we have been driven from optimizing tech for the developer experience of humans, because if we feel pain at maintaining jQuery, we invent React, But what if most of the coding is done by AI? Maybe we have less of a drive to improve the developer experience of AI. We are far from there, probably. But there is already some good consolidation in terms of languages and frameworks. I mean, the most popular ones have been around for a long time now. There is a chance that they will still be around, the same ones, for many years to come. I don't know.
Yeah, but something to think about, right? Like, what do we have to gain and potentially lose with these secondary indirect consequences of the AI tools that we end up adopting?
Yes, it's very hard to think about these things, because new models, new capabilities, new tools come out every day and invalidate everything we think. So even writing prediction posts is very risky. You risk to look very stupid just 6 months from now. But I dared, and I published it anyway.
You're inviting the crowds of people on Twitter to come and attack you in 6 months.
Yeah, exactly. And screenshotting the article, yes.
Yeah. Just be like, I was wrong. It's okay. At least somebody's out here talking about it. Yeah, I'm sorry. I was wrong. I'm sorry. But anyway, I really appreciate your insights after having written for many years now on these engineering and people-focused conversations with your podcast and your newsletter. And congrats on all the success.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. Thank you for having me on the show. I always love to talk about these things. So thank you again.